reservation wasn't endurance or speed but the clever mind indeed, speaking and being a thinker first, a surprising poetic giant, a deliberate cognizant, a nerdy 140 to 150 IQ when not lifting. An average prog metal instrumentalist, and viewer, listener. Being the smartest and brawniest was awesome, yet like hidden and hard to interpret, obviously it felt like being kindly recognized in your best theoretical version today. If someone insults your triceps you insult them intellectually, if someone insults your nerdy hobby you energetically throw them out of the window into the garbage disposal, hairy legs sticking up. Sometimes he was a gentle, fascinated, patient, observing, uninteractive person, seems related to strength. Being fascinated by color combination mods, tear-jerking shimmering red dawns, women and the human condition. Some mistook it for complacency and insensitivity showing nothing but he could very actionable and emotional when it was finally time to act. The reservation and truth of the analyst. He had a conservative energy and reservation sometimes but believed in left ideas now being convinced by monologuing people, although giving everything a chance. Maybe he showed a less conservative side when speaking, in the brilliance and tolerance of theory. He had a pet 1.2 meters continental giant rabbit, these really exist, that ate vegetables for him at 100 pounds a month, called Sigmund the Destroyer. He was the light brown happiness with the big ears, his feet echoed like drums, dormant speed and giant size dormant power. He appreciated being fed these different vegetables shaped, stacked like vegetable cakes and being seemingly safe, but what if someone brought a dog? They had before. He viewed in front of the very sunny hobby room and looked out through the satellite room, high up like a cat. He liked looking at different people, recognizable cosmopolitan human world and was happy until stimulation from something else was needed. As a rabbit things had to be familiar and thus he would show his cute sides, he was alert and cautious, easy to flight but being 1.2 meters there was a fair amount of reasonably fair ground, he knew he was a special kind of animal. He was friendly with his human that came and went, strange alien-like purpose, but what purpose what there is staying in here all the time, he wanted a garden. There was no second bunny. He had an expensive apartment in London, all apartments in London are expensive, where everything was sleek, futuristic, black and white, artsy and claustrophobic. It was just 120 square meters but he had fit in a lot of furniture. He was materialistic about his apartment, his TV, everything had to give an impression of course, exhausting and a look into his mind. Artist on vacation, everything had a place. He used his considerable contemporary salary to buy a living room set after fitting kitchen set, it made him feel personal. It's like the start of the Fight Club movie. He was good at memorizing parts of history, he countered like an informed punch, something too true. He was already ready to pay attention and categorize history, to point out a fifth detail too far. He had the complete history of the world, series, memorized gistly in 15 books, but thought it didn't go deep enough. What was the point of the left revolutions of South America, that's more important. Why did America stop every single one, even if communism doesn't work out so well in practice and so far, what is the threat to capitalism and how costly do it need to be to defend this broken system? Turns out when you're a thinker you like getting to the bottom of why and how things work, fascinated and unrelenting, unwavering, as you need it, every thinker taking the same path not noticing each other, proper and thorough inner world. Curious in a way doesn't always make sense and exhausting to exert and listen to, but to get things going sometimes you need to have an extra fire lit under you. The energy to keep unwavering, countering with a second truth. If you miss the chance to be thorough intellectually, you might miss the differentiating part. Every personality, maybe out of 16 has their own kind of introverted underfire, especially the introverts and a time to fit the intensity. 95% of people are thinkers, we're not orangutans. And less differentiating personality types, thought James mixing his protein powder with cocoa powder, spirulina algae and creatine in a white tank top. The V-shape gleamed good in contrast to the white, the room was comfortably dimly lit and would tell him to sleep if he had listened deeper. He had a smoothie of healthy dark green leaves, pure fiber, flax seeds and lawn pepper, he would make another one and fit in the excess health, forgetting he had another 5 things to fit into his eccentric intelligence. Better safe than sorry. In recovery for perfect recovery, he was in his routine of gymming and reading, both making him smarter, BDNF vascular and through language. The prospect of reading is enough to increase IQ points, the efficient part is the language part. He was thinking about how there's the perfect and worst position in 4D chess or 5D golf. The smart thing to figure out here is, and how to beat 4D chess. There is not a certainty or probability cloud but you have to go for the next best thing. If you had an AI being able to consider every let's say 1000 positions you would find the swing that moved the ball to the hole in 4D dimensions at the same time. Just look for it, you wait until you find the guaranteed best move. And the worst one, both backwards unless you swung at a limited amount of degrees. In 7-dimensional golf there could be an uneven amount of middle ground and perfect cohesive swings. We must quantify strange infinites, listing exceptions to logic or consider brackets like pre-thought to consider same proclivities, they are like a dip into an abyss, thus in thought. The feeling was light, hovering and lightly touching subjects. Was everyone unique, impressionable who wanted to change the world a feeler then? More feeling than they thought maybe, so many people are just not impressionable or concerned. James was an ENTP Myers-Briggs personality, great personality writing, concerned with ideas, future and theory, math, science, logic, abstract instead of practical, the intuitive extroverted engaging in the world giving him artistic blur and ideas, and being able to pick complicated relations seemingly from nothing, from a mind in the clouds in abstract trance contexts, no one else can do this actually. 6 brain areas are always activated instead of 2 relations. I've got it, they say. Clearly these far things relevant to people are connected like this. Worse at certain realistic things, in danger of getting realistically outpaced in armchair analysis. When an intelligent person feels like to analyze properly as you should, the others always feel different interrupting urges. Surely this would be interesting to everyone and they would listen like in school or something. Debating, innovating and being intuitive, changing himself and his surroundings into his visionary future. P, and then E for extroverted. The future, it depended on his intelligence. As an idea person, an ENTP's first run at an idea isn't their best, it's their last, all come out unfiltered. He was a man prating of constant improvement, who spends all their life without improvement. Not the philosophers who wonder we're good enough the way we are. Performance and maybe even perfection, not always seen and not always recognized like a deeper theory level. A lot of people's inner worlds can be surprising, hard to imagine and resounding like you failing to admit being bad at something, yet still intelligent. It's a different world than people who are just meeting the weekends or studies to go to an expensive bar, maybe assertive in career, wealth or privilege, with more than a party or who live for final, 2 late vacations outside of work or excitement and stupid exciting risk. For those that live for gourmand experiences and the best of culture, for those that question and contrarian fit and conquer, for those that live perfectly confined in the illusions of society and those who don't. It's painstaking eternal cleanse, existing for the future and not the rewarding present, easily finding goals possible in 10 years, fit ambition on the good days and never recognition quick. The bane of realizing, improving everything mediocre, to become some sort of unit. Maybe an Übermensch, quote Nietzsche on an insane day. When you are a thinker you spend your whole life learning for the sake of learning, never approved, comparing and improving always out of reach. When I would be perfect in brain, speed and brawn, everyone would respect me, they would bask in my glory and I would take it from there. Although when balanced he turned insightful, coming like a new stranger, surprising him too, another exhausting idea for sharing, through easily interrupted. The introverted side people didn't see was that of a nerdy book reader, mathy and strategic, like a brilliant scientist, more dry, logical. The introverted logical part of the thinkers is supposed to be completely dry, even without creativity and intuition. Wouldn't want to not be logical. Climbing societal ladders quietly, more so than the primary extroverted side, interacting with the world and gave him the creativity, resources and strategy to do so. It felt competitive but didn't have as much primary resources as some other people do, the very feeling indeed is auxiliary. In lack of ability against the smartest chessboard masterminds INTJ, for example, they feel they just need more time, or that they are still onto some good stuff. Every personality using their secondary function feel like they are onto some good stuff. Some might be never be reached because of the simple fact they are not introverted. Only 33% are introverted, but everyone has an introverted world, enjoying pursuing alone, exciting different like series binged and unknown unless you talk about it. The depth of the introvert is more surprising said to the way they talk about pen and paper. Enjoying expanding the limits of his knowledge and intelligence, he had a thirst for knowledge and performance, strength that was hard to understand unless he was doing the right thing. Like a voice telling him to inappropriately do something insanely silly. Everyone's eccentricities and quirks make sense when they're doing the right thing. Some of the weirdest people are good at explaining things thoroughly for newcomers, but they also need to listen, match. He could spend time with people, drink and cheer, but also a long time alone as an ambivert. Ambiverts get energy from people but are too sensitive to keep it for long. Like a sadness over a truth. He was an intellectually overexcitable typical in intellect, imagination, at least he had an imagination and psychomotor. Incredibly,
I'm looking
excellent
forward to
active mind,
casting
extreme
some
desire to synthesize truth, morals, contemporary theory, to analyze and categorize and think about thinking. He could be a lone wolf but not as bad as the introverted thinkers. The ENTP is the extrovert with the biggest introverted side. Their minds is a fine place to be alone with, not just the
Make
existing world.
vampires.
Some other smart things he was thinking about. He could have been a professor in any science but he was lazy,
Alright,
waiting for
time
spurs
for
of
some
energy and
4K
reliable results.
streams.
Don't think of quantum physics as logic with exceptions, think of it as exceptions with logic, throw the logic out the window. To get James' attention you could talk about comfortable things but not comfortable enough, flashes of enthusiasm and neuroticism. If you quantify the next logical thing, a sequence of theory, a higher exponentiality, what's the next smart thing in physics after electron position into a probability cloud? We think it must functions as 5 plus 5 or 5 times 5 or necessarily 5 times 5 times 5, but it is not necessarily true, it is just nonlinear, random. What is silly over time through nets of copy and control? First twist contemporary. James had a body he had carefully built with steroids over the last 10 years with a brilliant eccentric theory to training, research like a scientist in muscular lab coats and best of the best knowledge of nutrition that few really knew about at this point. Just look at these natural
I
athletic
was thinking to
performance
stop fucking
enhancers.
editing my text.
Sometimes pivoting in books he felt lucky to read, that is potential. Googling the right efficient gym questions for the perfect gym session. Although he had spent the last half his life, like many others, learning about the perfect gym session. Like perfecting a sculpture learning theory and quickly feeling like monologuing. Explaining like fairly scientific, everyone explained like this is true and
Like,
meta.
I don't think these
So many
buildings
YouTube
around
videos,
here.
exercising vlogs from average people who just did steroids, that is the cycle. You find a new fitness YouTuber, they talk about a different exercising, then they just took steroids. But literally being brilliant, thus he walked around with the perfect updated theory like Golden Seer, if people would only ask. If you're not gaining enough muscle, you must go back to the 8 basics. What a stupid thing to do it was. When you take steroids you lose your mind, not just your dingleberries. Jesus, liver thinks you're an alcoholic. He had figured out a way back with foods that increase learning speed and problem solving, but if there was only a way, like with magic, things could be solved. Thankfully this is a fantasy book. For now there was a muscle monster posing the most impressive. He knew every number that could be given to a muscle, every thought to theoretical, and time for every exercise and intensity. Reps and short recovery. The strongest nerd had figured it out. How much does variety help versus the best exercise for every muscle group? Cocoa powder gave as much grip strength as creatine. Athletic performance enhancers were sometimes cheap too, and he used for anti-cancer properties, etc. He used 6 like nutritional yeast, spirulina algae, black peppermint oil, hard fenugreek tea seeds, maca roots, ashwagandha, rosenroot, and a nitrate diet, giving him a whopping 50 to 60% increased athletic performance, exactly endurance, speed, and strength. The legs went by themselves. Repetition was a thing in theory, and he had a huge advantage over other steroid users. There was no chill, and then he was ready to go again after 2 hours where others needed 20. Legendary exercising routines he had, capable of doing heavier and longer than anyone else. By the way, the gym sessions were 3 hours each. He liked the atmosphere, aluminum can sound, and the smell of the plastic mats at the gym. Gym luxury affected him a lot, like there's the reward he's looking for his efforts. Thusly Pinnacle Beastum Musculum felt like he could just add more and more weight on some muscle groups. It really was an unbreakable endeavor. Like a hero, he was supposed to have this perspective and position. He was a gym monologuer, ever chiseling at the perfect gym session and advice. Philosophized, did he feel right in the muscle contracting, or was it a fake distraction? Which contraction is a distraction? His small perfect packages of advice, like a tweet max 280 letters, in the gym, the ENTP being the best to synthesize their thoughts into coherent, well-worded exactly what they meant. He wanted things to be easy, focusing on the biggest things, respecting every gym traveler no matter where they were. Twist contemporary too. He fought in old-fashioned medieval games as in unit, knight style. They really exist as long as you can afford the armor and don't hit below the steel belt. He got excited for the Knight World Championships as much as anything. Light armored macemen with 40 functional
Wait, I
helms,
must
dual
go
wielding
5
axes,
minutes
arbalist
and
shooting point blank, with slow
say
reload,
something to a
shooting through plate,
person.
but point blank bows were very plate piercing similar. Two-handed maces like made
Something
out of
like
Japanese wood, double ends, or hammers being too heavy, always like an equation, bald and pale users egregious. Polearms and steel plate are way too good, like a castle you don't think about damage underneath. Maybe one should judge technique and get extra point for other things than just whacking steel. Suggestion: 1 point for every hit, or just enact medieval computer games in real life. They got it figured out. Let's see who wins in a free-for-all. His first weapon of choice was a triple-equipped polearm because it could be used as a spear, slice on the front, or hammer at the back. With the range a cleaving menace, like longer two-handed swords he scrutinized. Secondly, a giant Japanese two-handed katana, nodashi, he wore in one hand. The dual wield was unrelenting and truly menacing. James thought of every dual wield to be unique and problem-solving to a shield and reliable when switched around. Also, you weren't allowed to hammerplate, it's considerably more expensive. He could swap the wield for defense with mace, an elongated thick glaive kite shield, meaning it was sharp as a sword in the end. Often you can smack, stun, and stab with your shield in combat. There is more to this simple defensive position. Maybe the enemy is so within the reach of the shield length, yet trying to go through. Full black plate armor, white, gilded gold, some places smooth, or arms and legs free. Both had their advantages. Better with a kite shield than armor if I could just choose one, thought James strategically, masterfully, and a bit playful competitive. Block and slash where my arms go thus. A crowd favorite was his armored boxing. Everyone loved Knight's boxing furiously. Some of these guys stun like a warhammer with their fists through plate. With weapons like the polearm, James also put 1 decimeter glaives into his right gauntlet. A polearm is only dangerous at the pointy end. Closer attacks were stabbed with his gaunt gauntlet George steroid unicorn pants thus. Everything changed like a chapter, but not yet, where one evening after hot medieval games he heard someone sniggering in his computer corner thus. There was nothing there? It seems he was being sent incredibly suggestive Gachimuchi songs. There goes another one. Something was just too ridiculous to keep a straight face. Specifically trying to communicate, what is this you're listening to, human? Revealed and silly over time, James stretched out his hand into his apartment nothingness and felt temperature difference, cold, something wet, suction and stretching of his mind. Things changed as he stuck around. That could only mean aliens? Deducted panicky James, they must be serious sternly as per needed basis, but this through sensitivity that too ridiculous for the paid work thus. Advanced civilization through technology, carefree world where we toil in despair and worry. Technology advances pretty quick with just 1,000 years through for anyone, or ourselves. More sensitive and smarter than your imagination, James used his imagination. James had read about the most common alien encounters on Wikipedia and thus imagined the Scandinavian-looking alien, a cousin to humans, concerned with spiritual paths. James realized just thinking about summoning aliens, and summoning, chanting annoying should be enough. James had been scientifically open to aliens because of the prominence of 1,000 planets with life conditions like Earth. The 4 thinker personalities believe in aliens the most. Look at the pollution they exert into the atmosphere seen through color gas cameras. But what do you do now when you actually meet one now? Partying? What be thine alien, grey, homunculus, Scandinavian cousin? Stop sending out shuttles looking for life, we're right here, I admitted. James thought, can you think what I think, and then said it. And feel what you feel, Jim Human. He looked like a mix of grey alien and something taller forsooth. Did you figure out time travel yet? James was ready to have a pleasant, well-mannered conversation. It only works with special fashionable hamsters thus put through non-Intel graphics cards. Just recently, the humorless voice answered, it was unexpectedly difficult, like learning a new language, difficult, like being unable to master. Time, space, dimension, machine and spiritual opening at the same time, not a lot of people thought of that. It can't happen to me, and let me guess, you cannot show thus? No human unit, think of 5 reasons why. I am one of the smartest humans. Unexpectedly, he said, very well, Jim Human. What about pollution balance, population? Shut up. Unexpectedly and tiresome, James pulled out a gun. If you threaten me, you will always think to rectify the situation, you will come to compensate, think up new ideas, but smart boy, you will never be smart enough to figure it out. I wish there was a time where a bullet didn't win against every duel, thus and everything, the gun wins, I will win. There is no skill, no time to think, the cool things now is the size of the firearm you wield, only the aim. The alien man dodged like morphing, swirling through a dash, cheating through the human technology. The alien took his wrist, coldly threatened, and he was indeed pulled through a cascade of time and colors, but it felt like his feet were still on the ground. He had been transported to medieval London 1,000 years ago. He was ostracized with a katana odachi and 18 bullets in a time of arbalist and warhammer, blood and ice, wine and piss. Chapter 2. Ass of Power and the Path of the Nerd. James really had a strong ass, it was a breathing living block, you could see it like anti-gravity, something lifted with ease, doesn't matter how heavy the box was. You could source a lot of power to movement lifting, where pushing it was connected to the bottom, it is a large muscle. Fitting in his full mail, fashionable like you would worry where the skill was, lacking a morning star, he had been practicing so much consistently to auxiliary, his mind had really fitted to bludgeoning, then to racial considering. He had written about a cosmopolitan black London man in a time of theory and tolerance through history, but now things were cerebral. There was still racism and stupid people in modern eras, he thought. A struggle that should be won, and people the most tolerant and standards people should have had earlier. What he didn't know was that there were now staunch wizards, just like in the stories. With the visor down you could not see his melanin, he pretended to be white as cocaine and snowflakes. Would he fight another day, summon the grid or pretend to be anonymous like an assassin? With my visor down I can play a two-faced game whenever I want, reap the benefits and of manners. He had speedy strange thoughts about what more you could get away with in this time. Time for hard and right and wrong to catch up to the thoughts. What it really was a kind of moral purifier, a wanting to be good and lawless desperado. He went through lakes smashingly British, what life could there be in black and treacherous mud, except potential life? The alien missed without about 500 meters, it was just a wee bit, or maybe continental movement. There was a tree of 42 hanged men and 2 lavish grey and yellow-colored knights, gleaming like sentinels and robotic limbs, minding their business and status. One had their hands on their pommel, showing too little care of the carcass. Ironically, they didn't say anything, concerned with being knights. There was Roman rounded bridges and dirt roads until London steel like flat stones, guards seemed intolerant enough and maybe shouldn't have wielded a polearm. He went towards Hayroof and Pie Bakery, a castle with a yard and perplexing medieval smells, like old furniture, sheets, smells from a different time, energy of different dominant, privileged things. There were banners held in hand, on castles and over chainmail, Scottish blue and white, square high castle segments but not fashionably bland, ramparts. Towers for chess and halls for complaining, and just like in the background of the British flag, maybe this was the beginning of the Twitter logo. Farquaad thus predicted Facebook. At a pub, baked beans on toast, he felt retro-legendary and sucked in all information with his 5 senses. Something unusual, but he did when overcharged and overhealthy. It gave him access to overloading his senses. 500 meters is enough to walk when you're lazy. James flicked on and off his laziness, not noticing breaching limits. He had his own pace of things, something ahead, sometimes behind. Intellectual mentions would stimulate him and he didn't notice he had an infinite energy for mental accumulation, sparring. To his right ear he heard a lady say, "The youth in London just want to drink and discuss football." Seems like nothing had changed, he thought. He went to the bartender with the wrong pounds and was interrupted thus, thrice. "I'll have what he's having." A gigantic barbarian woman stood thus, in black leather, muscular like a bodybuilder but less contoured, enormous 8-pack, and on her back she had a German 2-hander, a Zweihander, the thing had a meter guard. Above the hilt, egg face, fashionably and sexily showing some plenty skin betwixt leather, circular secondary ceremonial guard and a grip that was noticeably large even if you knew 2 hands could fit there. She was fair enough for you to accept the muscle, long hair unknown to men with the same haircut. "Something like Guinness," answered James in beer territory. "I have Guinness if you want Guinness." "No, something like Guinness." "If you want that, I have Guinness." "All right, you convinced me." Alcohol affected James less because he was huge muscle but more because he had no fat cells and the biggest abs. "I don't recognize your armor." "What is that, from fashionable London? Bird and Buckler Sons?" "More like from another contemporary time," said Sentinel James. James paid with a whole pound, which he thought would confuse the barman. I got this sword as a mercenary, and she eyed the holster, impossible to miss. The impossible communication was of a feeler thus. James thought to be a mercenary, fitting in like a sword in a woolly glove. Time to lie, pretend with ploy. What do you work with, lady? Are you fresh with a kill or boat? What brings you to drink alcohol? I'm a mercenary, lady of Germany first. I'm paid by King Henry I, she said. You have been pulled into the 100-year French-English War. Can I have an opinion of that? As a historian, James remembered we have two huge parts of the French northwest coast, but would not keep them. It's a German sword, Zweihander. It's easy enough to swing, you don't need heavy armor, people just keep their distance. I'm a German mercenary. It's heavyweight, he said, versed in the ways of thus culture, thought and speech. Maybe. I'm just procuring cold talk, he said, as if the sword was a lightweight, ready to show of his dormantness. I've never lost in physical endeavors hither. Do you dare to arm wrestle a just woman? Honor the streak? There was the reason. James reached out his hand and met thus leathery grasp. She was strong and practiced in a way that reminded of steroid friends. After some even fighting, James figured out he could win this. He had more strength and endurance. She used everything, weak to sudden moves like a small shoulder. He showed a finger and put it on the table edge. With this tiny difference, James rotated his upper body 90 degrees, balanced on his finger, pulled her onto the table, and slammed his fist upon it. He exclaimed, being talented at showing off. Impossible, she exclaimed for some reason, concerned with something greater. Fine streak, I am sure. 27 arrogant men, she said. James opened his visor and made a face like a vacuum cleaner. Gotta eat big to get big. I didn't know thine honorable knightness was white as an ice crystal in Ass Creek winter, sir. My name is Eugene thus, and your katana I know from my travels, admitted. It's the two-handed size, Odachi thus, something they have to name longer swords. I wield it in my right. James had figured out how to nullify the damages of steroids too, with liver-strengthening superfood like wheat germ, quadruple green tea capsules working overtime, being poisonous. Even too much antioxidants at once is poisonous. James was the kind to reach the limit. He could feel it too, but then you could eat other antioxidants. Cardiovascular, kidney organ working food, and two variants at once of a liver working medicine. With the two super compounds sulforaphane and spermidine, make your own joke, it's a longevity compound efficient for longevity. You don't need to do anything else. He figured he would come out even in longevity on top. If you repair the damage each time, there is no damage, like banging your toe against a desk. But before the steroids, he was already a monster, winning competitions where his opponents used them, and few years in the gym. There was a certain smile that was real on stage there, something intellectually golden. To be the biggest, you have to already have the genetics. For example, so many get an abnormal, huge organ gut. Palumboism, it is known, from Dave Palumbo. He knew how to change his genes into better roads and repair telomeres, DNA, having genetical advantages like a scientist. Eugene watched him doze off into a mathematical world. He thought so. The surroundings seemed to slow down and said, you need less recovery time when training your arms. Speaking of which, they are small, relatively, and explosive. Train them like they are. The legs have 4 times more muscle. Just as you eat some and work out some and rest some, you will become strong. She had a working lazy strategy here and seemed much more fat in spirit whenever the words came across. I need to form a mold around a bullet, craft it if I have to, remove it and fill it with red-hot steel to potentially get more bullets. I didn't understand any of that, honestly. James showed a bullet and rotated it. Pure magic, I would say. James liked the simpleness of the medieval times. A lot of people do, but not because he liked nothing changing. It's so inviting. There's solid castles, walls that honestly didn't bear siege anyway in the latest few hundred medieval. But they were indomitable, stagnant, infinite in the beginning. That's when the very expensive building trend started. As a historian, he understood these things, and as a thinker, he understood deeply, connecting things anyway. Eugene told James about the Gladiator Coliseum-like tournament in the Duke's honor. Posts interestingly said 70 kilograms weight limit, knock them unconscious for 30 seconds or death. No stupid faces when unconscious. 5,000 pounds for the winner, invitations to royal arrogance guaranteed. No griefing wizards, go to Glasgow you tits. Just kill everyone, be the ultimate predator, Eugene competitively said. You can swing your sword and sit on them thus. Someone cut off their beard pretending not to be a wizard. But he had to muster something thus. It's just like the tourney games, 1 versus 1 at a time. You got a feeling like this would be a bad idea, maybe a set-up feeling, because maybe that fighting, the best 6 or 4 could result in your death. He went in and noticed the gladiators chatting about the entrance. They were social meatbags. Sven is unstoppable. No one can stand before the earth-shattered dual hammer wields. There is no death sure but from Sven. The Grim Reaper has 26-inch arms and his name is Sigmund. Do you guys think I'm going to be worried about anything like this? Said James, still towering, pulling a seat. Did you listen to a word we said, goon? Said like an ESFJ. I'm happy to tell you should just try to survive against Sigmund, dance and make him tired. There is a strategy to every foe, and everything. We become brothers here quickly, dying brothers. The man looked in the distance. We who are about to die salute you. When the gates opened, he saw a very iron-clad opponent with a hammer, Sven the shield guard. This was going to require something else than cutting. Maybe. His throat seemed wide open when he looked at least a little bit up. The assassin looked for the bleeding throat. There is not much tanking plate mail against a hammer either. He surprisingly threw his odachi like a spear arch long when they were in range, but his opponent looked down as he came charging surprisingly, then up again enough to deflect the giant Japanese javelin. James tried to slash his throat, but Sven thus looked down and deflected with gleaming metal, defiant faceless helmet and will. The announcer said, fat and enjoying himself like God Bacchus. No one had seen that gap coming. We understand now. James was trying to make his opponent look up. The power on metal was crushing. The next slice against his face knocked Sven spinning to the ground. Why did he think he could defend against that in the moment? Maybe there was something to it, but he couldn't fully comprehend. It's about summoning enough strength, as you said,
I don't want to do
previous
this.
fights. James swung like a lumberjack
I'm gonna
splitting
stop.
naughty contemporary wood.
I wanna do
Twice he
something
hammered
else.
on the ground where the Englishman fell down, rolled away just